Okay.
So any follow-ons from yesterday?
Anybody? Anyone?
And just for the team, I did give my notes to Barb and Kelly. I just sent them to them first in case I have any mistakes in there or procedural stuff that shouldn't be before they distribute to you guys.
Yes, I will acknowledge receipt of those notes. I just haven't had a chance to even look at them.
Yeah, I just want people to be like, you told me you're going to give me my notes. I just don't want to make any mistakes.
Thanks, Mark.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're good. We're good to move forward then.
Okay, I will follow. I think I brought it up yesterday, but I'll repeat it. I know I put in there that small sourcing potentially didn't have amendment on contracts. I was wrong. Tracy went through and validated for us that the difference between that small sourcing role and the other sourcing role is just the ability to do sealed bids. Okay. That's it. They have full access to manage their contracts, just as anybody else would that has that contract management role.
Okay. Right.
All right, John, off to you, bud.
I was muted. Said, all righty. All right. So actually, Mark, let me ask, is this a good time to go through that spreadsheet that I just sent you from Confluence? Just do a quick overview and we can send it out for people afterwards.
You muted, Mark.
Oops.
Uh-oh.
I think it's probably helpful. I think so. Barb and Kelly, what this is, I know Lisa has it in there. We have kind of an overall. Hey, how did conversion of my rules work so that I feel comfortable that it did what it's supposed to do, and so that I can talk to an organization when they say, "Where is this thing?" Right.
Yep, that would be helpful for us for sure.
All right, John.
All right. Let's go ahead and share. Let me know when you guys can see my screen.
We're good.
Yeah, you're good, John.
I'm going to throw this in chat real quick as well. If anybody does not have access to Confluence, just let me know and I can send an email with it later. Or basically, it's just a big grid here where we went through every rule type, signer rules, different BISense.org rules, and we basically listed absolutely everything out. You'll kind of see as I scroll down, we have some information where it's there are no watchers, for instance. And so anywhere where it has convert no, those are not going to be converted in to the system. Obviously, anywhere that says yes, they will be. So the big ones, commodity code approvers, BISense.org approvers, most of the signer rules other than override rules at a high level are all being converted. We've got expenditure limit, all the dollars. Let's see, large order we already did. I'm kind of just scrolling through. You guys can kind of review this and see if anything jumps out to you with your organizations as something to be concerned about. I think when we went through the initial kind of design and review of this, most of this was the override rules not being available anymore because I value the rule setup itself is different, as we saw on Monday. Where it's not really you fire all these rules and then you set up a rule to make some rules go away. Now it's more you set the rule up to fire when you want it to fire and you have that flexibility. So we're very aware that after go live there will be some tweaking of these rules, and I think that was a big push for getting the user management, data management functionality out to you guys so that fairly soon after go live, you can go and start tweaking rules to be able to work the way they either were working with override rules, which really there weren't many override rules. There were probably mostly contract override rules than anything. There were only a couple people that used the P card override rules, but you can kind of see from this page the analysis that was done. But outside of the overrides, the other rules that got removed were just rules that are now considered legacy, right? Things that fired if you were sending to Advantage, you know, those kind of things that just aren't there anymore. So I'm not going to go through every line of this. I kind of scrolled through. Hopefully, if you were looking for something specific, you can take a look. And then if you have any questions after this, you know, let me know, and we can talk about anything that you may be worried about. But for now, that's kind of all I wanted to show on here. Does anyone have any questions before I move on to the workflow overview?
Hey, John, it's Kimberly. Did they all convert with the same name that's shown on the screen, or are they called something different?
I believe they came over with the name dash, so
Okay,
that we'll know.
thank you.
Sure.
Hey, John, it's Bree.
Mhm.
I don't know, whatever day it was that we talked about UNSPC commodities.
Mhm.
I saw that it did convert, yes, and it says UNSPC, whatever that thing is. So is it going to default to whatever family NIGP code it is, or how are we handling that?
So I believe it's going to go to the family, and then anything in that family we
Okay.
grabbed. So like, let's say it's 05 or 005. Anything we grabbed anything under 005 and added it to the rule. So if there's 005, 01, 02, 03, all of those will list in the rule.
Okay, so it won't be that long 8-digit one, it'll be whatever equates
That'll
to
just be-
NIGP. Okay, thank
Mhm.
you.
Cool. All right, who's excited for workflow? Anybody? Yeah. All right. Well, you guys got a little bit of a taste of the rule functionality and kind of how you manage that on Monday. Today, I'm going to walk you guys through the workflow itself, kind of a little bit of comparison for where we were to what we are now. We have some pieces that we're working on right now to really solidify workflow to be what it needs to be for go live. But most of that is already in UAT to be able to look at and review. Obviously, there will be bugs. There will be things that I'll point out and tell you we know that this is a problem, and we're working on it. But I wanted to give you guys an overview of the full workflow, how you ad hoc an approver, where you can ad hoc an approver, and how that functionality works. We're going to talk a little bit more about EVA approvals, which is where we talked about on Monday, the different rule setups and how those kind of work together. And then lastly, we're going to talk about QMgr and how we'll hopefully utilize that a little more so moving forward, because we were actually able to create something that I think ends up being better than what Ariba had, and allows for more flexibility. So we'll kind of walk through all of those, and as you have questions, I'll try to have some logical stops, because I know if I get 50 minutes into this thing and then ask for questions, it's gonna be hard to go back to ask. So before I start, any questions, thoughts, concerns? Did I miss any of the topics? I think that was all the ones we were talking about today.
Yeah, John, given the fact I think this is the only main topic today, yeah, we did it yesterday. We got plenty of time, so feel free to take questions along the way.
Awesome.
When you feel it's the right point.
Cool. All right, so what I have opened right here is actually a view of the workflow itself for requisitions. So at a very basic level, there are two types of nodes within iValuo workflow. You have an approval node, which are going to be these rectangles where some action needs to be taken. So like, for instance, for draft, you need to click submit for it to move forward. For approvals, they would need to click approve, right? So if you kind of expand that out, it kind of fits the logic all the way through. You also have these diamonds that I don't know if they're called decision diamonds or if that's just what I called it from like elementary school or whenever you learn about decision diamonds. Decision diamonds on deciding where it routes through the flow. So as I kind of go through this overview, I'm going to talk a little bit about how the requisition moves through at a very high level. And then we'll talk about more or less what we're doing on the look ahead, where we're able to see the data in the requisition and define where it's going. So we have a really good idea, even before you click submit, where the requisition needs to be approved and reviewed. So we'll start with the very first one, and I'm just going to do a full overview of everything just so that everything's recorded, we're on the same page, and then if we need to come back to anything specific, I'll open it up for questions once I get through the whole thing. But we have a decision node in the beginning called new or significant change requests. This was when we initially did the design, we talked about the idea of a significant change request or a non-significant change request. You know, if you need to change the title of a requisition, those kind of things that don't require a approval refire. We have the flexibility with this decision diamond to be able to define those things. Currently, everything goes through the workflow. So no matter what, the answer to this question will always be yes for right now. This gives us the flexibility moving forward if something as simple as the title. If we want to look at that and say, is that the only thing that changed? Okay, if that's the only thing that changed, then we can skip all of these approvals and move forward. And we can have the flexibility to start adding little things for more of the administrative changes that won't require the full workflow. But for day one, we wanted to be more safe than risky. So we said everything goes through the full workflow no matter what. Next up, we've got our requester approval. This is a new one for a lot of you that were testing probably a month ago in UAT. You haven't seen this yet. This is very similar to the setup that we had where it was the requester, not preparer rule. So if I create something on behalf of Lisa, let's say, so on my requisition itself, I can choose Lisa in the requester field. The very first approver checks, am I Lisa? The answer would be no. So then it goes to Lisa to be able to approve before it even gets out the door, checks any other questions. It's just a kind of that basic check that we really didn't have a month ago that we were able to put in here for any on behalf of type ordering to allow those users to review and approve before it goes out the door. If you are the requester, it will auto approve and continue through, won't slow you down, won't stop you. You'll just see this box is going to be green and you're done. So for 99% of, probably more than that, of requisitions going through, the requester approval will always be green and you'll move through the flow as usual. One of the rules that we talked about with conversion in that little tab that I showed you guys was the large value rule. So what we did previously was we had a signer rule across every agency that would fire over $1 million, so that Shane or anybody else could look at it and say, oh, you might have fat fingered this. I don't think you want to spend $40 million on basketballs, you know, that kind of thing. So really all this is doing is just checking, hey, is your requisition greater than $1 million? If it is, it has to go to the large value approval. This is a good example of our EVA-wide type role or approval profile setup. No matter where this fires, it goes to Shane and team. So if a locality creates something more than $1 million, then it goes to Shane. If DGS creates something over $1 million, it goes to Shane. As opposed to the entity type rules, which he would have to belong to those entities to be an approver. So that's just kind of an example of our EVA-wide approval profile logic. The next ones, we kind of probably over-engineered and thought through this process when we did the design. We wanted to have an idea for anything with an emergency label or an emergency track to be able to bypass approvers, but still require a high level, director level approval to be able to get procurements through quickly. Once we got into system test UAT, we we realized that that had a little too much power the way that we had designed it. You know, if you just change the PO category to emergency, now you're skipping the entire approval flow. It was just a little too much for day one. I think moving forward, it allows us some flexibility to be able to look at emergency type procurements and maybe set specific rules. You can see here, it actually heads down into our approval rules bucket, which is our EVA approvals. Everything kind of flows through here as opposed to really bypassing the flow. But at this point, day one, what you guys need to know is the answer to this question will always be no. Regardless of what's on the rec, there's nothing to trigger the fact that it's an emergency at this point. But if we ever want to have that functionality, we can do it. Next up is going to be confirming order. For those of you who have created requisitions within Even Next, you know you can choose types, either purchase, confirming order, or DPS administrative request. DPS administrative request has its own workflow completely separate of what you see here. So this is really checking, is it a confirming order? And then you can have a confirming order approval that is set up. I believe we set it up to be all manager level for an entity, and I'll need to confirm that and let you guys know exactly what it is. It's been a little bit since I've looked at it. But really what it does is it asks the question, is it a confirming order? Yes or no? And let me actually check this. Actually, the answer to this one will always be no. I forgot. We got rid of both of these because we didn't know who to convert into them. But we have the flexibility later to add to it. So I apologize, I misspoke. So the answer to this will always be no. The answer to this will always be no for now, for day one. And I do want to talk a little bit about confirming order because it is pretty powerful. When you guys saw me in the rules on Monday, and we'll go through a few examples, we can set the rules themselves to fire, whether it's a purchase or a confirming order. So that kind of gives us the confirming order override concept by being able to create a rule for a purchase that wouldn't fire for a confirming order, for instance. So again, when we went through, I think we went a little overboard when we were thinking about all the functionality and the cool things that Ivalua can do. And we ended up, I think, just saying for now, we'll skip these, but we want to leave it in case we want to add it later. Next up, we'll head to some things that hopefully sound very familiar. Expenditure limit. This is a basic check to say for the user, for the requester who's creating this requisition or who has the requisition created for them, what is their expenditure limit? Do they have one? And then who is their approver? If the requisition is over that limit, it fires the expenditure approval, which is the user that's defined in the user preferences tab in the users. So if you remember from Monday. This guy. So it checks if this is checked, it checks who the approver is and what the threshold is. So anything over 555 would go to Anna Croak in my user's case. All right, so now we get to the nitty gritty. These nodes right here, so roughly what, these 15 squares, this section right here is the power of our workflow. What it allows us to do is when you get to this point in the workflow itself, it is building a rule set for who needs to approve this requisition. And that can be 0 rules, in which case the answer to this approval rules question would be no, and it would just continue forward. Or it can be umpteen number of rules, 100 rules, 400 rules, doesn't matter. What happens is as it goes through, it hits this node, and EVA approvals can be many things. Right, I know within the workflow itself, it looks like one node, but if I'm looking at a requisition that was, or that's going through the approval flow itself, you'll see this gets triggered as many times as we have rules against it. Now that caused a little bit of confusion when we did it, and I'm actually going to pull up a requisition on a different tab to kind of show you guys what I'm talking about. So when I look at this requisition workflow, for instance, I've already gotten past the EVA approvals. But when I come down to the approval history, you can see here, or sorry, previous approvals. You don't get a lot of information. You just see EVA approvals multiple times, and it really doesn't add much information. It's more confusing than anything. So that's why we have these hidden for now. It's a nice way to debug if we need to. But what we're working on is building this approvals history, which actually says what the rule is that was approved, who approved it, what approval profile they belong to, if any, and when they approved it. So that will help kind of translate, you know, if EVA approvals fires 8 times, now you'll be able to see the 8 approvals that took place, who it was and for what reason. So the type of rule, which will be EVA approvals, and then the rule itself is going to be whatever's defined in that rule label. Let me just take a quick note. But as I said, this is something we're working on currently in dev, is building this history. So I think we kind of have half of that in UAT currently, which is where I'm showing you guys this. But I did just want to show that as something that we're working towards, that as well as our upcoming approvals and ad hoc, which I'll get into in a little bit. But I want to kick back into our workflow. But again, the idea here is once you hit this node, it's going to keep doing a loop effectively for as many times as there are rules. So if you have one rule, it will fire once. When it gets to here, it's going to say, hey, that's my last rule, and it'll kick out to the next one, which is going to be QMgr, which I'll talk about next. If the answer is no, it actually kicks back up to here and comes through EVA approvals again. So it'll just be a loop that runs over and over and over. If you have 20 rules, it's going to keep hitting EVA approvals 20 times. And then you'll be able to see with upcoming approvals or the approvals history where and what has happened to that requisition. So it has a lot of power. As you guys saw with the rules, it can do a lot of very interesting, and I'm sure you guys can come up with some fun rules to create. But in the background, really what's happening is it's just a loop that's going through over and over and over and just checking, hey, do I have a rule? Okay, what is it? Who's firing? Who needs to approve it? Next one, keep going, keep going. So I'll show you guys an example when we actually go through a requisition, to kind of see how that works as we move through the flow. But I know this one's a lot, so actually I'm gonna kind of just take a pause at this before I move to QMgr. Do you guys have any questions up to this point?
John, I have this is Angel. I have a question for you. The all the approvals up to the point where it goes to EVA approvals, are those going to be set for everybody regardless of how their current workflow?
Yes, all of these.
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay.
So you'll have, at this point, what it ends up being, sorry, the requester not a preparer, the large dollar, which is over $1 million, and then the expenditure limit are the only things that will fire for everybody right now, because these are not turned on right now.
Okay.
So to put it in comparison, it should be pretty similar to what most people are used to today. The main difference is some people have moved their requester not preparer to not be the very beginning of the workflow. That would be the only change to today's workflow that I can really see. Other than that, the large dollar has always been there for everybody. And then the expenditure limit, again, that's going to be in the beginning of the flow. It's not going to be where they may want to move it around. I think we had the flexibility to move it if we needed to.
Thanks.
Currently. Anybody's head spinning yet? I can't see you guys. So I'm assuming. Any other questions before I keep going? And again, this is a lot. It took a lot of years, honestly, thinking through how to get this to work in a different solution. And fortunately and unfortunately, I know a lot about workflow. So I get a little deep in the wood or in the, I get a little deep into it sometimes. So I apologize if I go off the deep end talking about things that may be unnecessary, but I think it's all good information if you can kind of absorb it. But again, this is not a, hey, now you guys are workflow experts. This is a, okay, now you have a basic understanding for how it works. Let's work together to really get this to work for us type thing.
Hey, John, I just want to make one kind of point back to on-hill kind of question. It is one common structure that we're, just like we did with security, where we kind of paired it back. It's one common structure we're using that everybody goes through the same workflow structure, regardless of organization for day one. Down the road, there is the flexibility in the system to define workflows, at a more granular level, like at an organizational level, like, VDOT could have their own picture of the workflow structure different than somebody else. But right now we haven't gone there. So, I just wanted you to have that knowledge. We're not promising that, but, as people ask questions, as we start to explore things, as we grow, that is a capability, not our initial intention, because that's very difficult to manage and, and work through. But I just wanted you guys to know that it's not a system limitation. It's a choice that we've made to right now to provide a structure that's common across all organizations.
Mark, this is on hell again. So
Sure.
I want to understand what you just said. So when this thing converts over, the current workflow they have will be coming over, or is this what everybody's getting?
This is what everybody's getting.
So
The rules are what convert on them.
okay.
So when you
got
get into one of those, that basically that big EVA approvals bucket is where you get into kind of some organizational specific things. But John will clear it up. But yeah, I think it is important to note that this structure, no matter what organization you're talking to, the structure will look just like this.
Right.
All right. Thanks, John.
Sure. And yeah, again, to Mark's point, really, this is the flexibility is in this section down here, right? Because you could have all of your signer rules, all of your license org rules, all fire within this bucket, if you will. And so that's really the organizational rules themselves is really going to be in this area. But the information for what needs to fire across the entire workflow is being converted in. So like if you have an expenditure limit today, you're going to have an expenditure limit in even next. That kind of thing is still being converted in. But as Mark mentioned, most of the rules are going to be in this guy right here. All right, next up, we're going to head up the flow. Shiva really wants to talk to me this morning. I don't think he sees that I'm presenting. So we've got QMgr. So some of you may know, some of you may be aware. Just keeps going. Yeah. QManager is something that we use a lot today. It's a way for, bigger organizations to be able to look at a lot of different requisitions coming in and assign them appropriately to different buyers, depending on some information, whether that means, it's coming from a particular community college in some cases, or maybe you're buying for a certain commodity, it goes to a different buyer. There's different criteria, so it's hard to really make a standard rule set to help them manage the queue.
Yeah, go ahead. Rebecca.
Hey, John, just go into Teams.
Yeah, I know. I thought it did it automatically.
DND. No, it says
Yeah,
you're in a
no.
meeting. It doesn't automatic. Yeah, there you go.
I thought when I was presenting, it just did
No, it's not that smart.
it. All right. Well, now he can set up a meeting for tomorrow. Okay, so QManager. Basically, we built the structure very similarly. For those of you who have organizations that use QManager, you're going to have a buyer manager, and then they're going to assign it to a team. And so that concept has stayed. What we've actually done, which is going to be a little bit different, is we didn't have a way initially to assign things out in bulk. So you could go in to each individual requisition, pick a requisition and assign it with no problem. So at a very basic level, the queue management system worked great. As soon as we got it into UAT and conversion, and VCCS and those groups started looking at it, they said, well, there's no way I can go into every requisition to assign this. It's just way too many requisitions that they get on a daily basis. I think VCCS gets like 200 or more a day that they'd have to like filter through and assign out. So we've done a little bit of tweaking and come up with a way to be able to bulk assign, which I'll show you guys after we get through the rest of this workflow diagram itself. But really the idea behind it is at the site level, there is a little yes, no box. If you guys remember from Monday, does your site require QManager? If so, then when the requisition comes through, no matter what, it will be routed into this buyer manager and then eventually buyer team. So buyer manager chooses the buyer team. So for our example, and what I'll go through a little bit later is, think of VCCS. You've got a rec that comes in, their community college, or whoever has QManager set up, like Tidewater Community College, for instance. They have QManager set up on their site. So when their requisition gets to here, the answer is yes. It goes to a buyer manager. So someone who has the approval profile buyer manager, and who has access to this particular organization will then be able to manage that and then assign it to a team who has buyer within that organization. And buyer is an approval profile in this case, not the high level profile that you assign to users. So again, I'll get into the specifics of kind of how this works, but the basics are fairly similar to the way we do things in Ariba, especially now that we can assign things out in bulk. But I will show you guys all of that after we get through the overview. All right, this next section, for some of you, it will hurt your head. For some of you, you won't remember a word I said, and that's okay too. But this is integration. So today we have requisition integration. We can move it around wherever we need to in Ariba. We do not have that flexibility, unfortunately, moving forward. We had to put it towards the end of the workflow. So after all your organizational updates, or approvals, and then your buyer manager approvals, it will come to integration if your agency is turned on. So again, we get to our diamond that says, for your site, do you require requisition integration? And what is your threshold? If the answer is yes, then you go through a full integration call where it goes out to the ERP or to BizTalk. BizTalk comes back, says approved or denied. All of that information is tracked within the history, and everything is good to go. I'm not going to go into crazy specifics on this unless somebody really wants me to, and in that case, we can talk about it later. But this same concept for the requisition integration actually happens at the order as well when the order is created. So before the order is visible to the supplier, there's a PO integration process where the same thing happens. So if you're turned on for both requisition and PO integration for your site, then you will have both of those that go through. If you have one or the other, you know, maybe you don't have requisition, so this would be skipped, but in the order itself, you would have an integration, and that would all happen before the order actually goes out to the supplier to be able to review. You can see we have a lot of additional nodes in here, you know, if there's an integration failure or a, you know, maybe a disconnect while something's being transmitted, or, you know, any of those kind of things, that's what this bucket is for, if there's any kind of a failure. Otherwise, if it does come back as a deny from the ERP, it will move down into this adjustments category. And then that allows the preparer to go in, make adjustments to it, and then restart, and kind of it kicks back to the beginning of the workflow. So that's integration. The last part, and this is something that some of you, again, will be fairly familiar with, is PO print. So we have a decision diamond, again, deciding if there is something within your requisition or some supplier within your requisition that requires the PO to be printed as opposed to being delivered through the URL. I do want to clarify, no matter what, this order is being sent online. But, you know, we do have, and I think there are still some out there, some suppliers that request that they get their PO printed and sent to them. So in this case, what we did was we made a very mini workflow engine, which is what the EVA approvals is down below. A really small one that just says, okay, for your organization, that can be site level, so your site or the entity. For either of those levels, who is your print approver in this case? If that has a value, so if you have populated it with, and for conversion, we grabbed any PO prints that exist on Bisense orgs today, and we pumped them into this rules section. So from a conversion standpoint, everything should feel the same for those users. But moving forward, if you wanted to add a different site to have a print approver, you would come in, you'd say what the site or entity level is for this PO print. If something on the requisition requires a print, so a supplier that is has requested that their orders be delivered via print, is the main one, and I can kind of just do a quick, or if their state entered. Any of those will require that it get printed. It will come down here, it will check the rules, and basically it'll say, if you have a rule, go approve it. If you don't have a rule, it just goes to order and goes out the door. So for those groups that, you know, maybe you don't have a PO print, but you still have a state entered vendor or a print type vendor, but you don't have a rule set up, it's going to just bypass and go through, which is actually how it's set up today. If you don't have somebody set up to print, it will just kind of skip out the door. Otherwise, it will come to this print PO guy for them to be able to print. You'll see a button that says generate order. For those of you who have played around in UAT, this has been in for a while, so you may have seen it. But really what it does is when you click generate order, it instantly creates your order, and you can see it in print right from that page. So you click a button, it refreshes, you have your order, print, and then send, however you need to send it.
Hi, John, this is Felicia.
Hey.
I am very new to this. So when you hover over each approval square, what does that information that pops up mean?
So the ones that are going to be actually helpful if you guys know SQL, which I don't know if you guys know SQL. But basically it's asking a question. Think of it as asking a simple question. So in this case, this particular SQL is looking at the requisition that we're in and making sure that the statuses are correct, the lines are correct, and then saying, hey, do any of the suppliers, are they state entered, or do they have print set up as their preferred ordering method? So I can show you a simpler one. So like this. Well, I thought it was going to be simpler, but really it's just asking a question saying, hey, are you over the expenditure limit? So we tried to summarize that in the actual node itself. But really I'm in as an admin showing you guys the overview. But this is just a query in the system to say, hey, tell me if this person has an expenditure limit, what it is, and are they over it for this requisition?
Okay,
Does that
so
make
if it says no, what does that mean? When you have act, performers, all, and it says no?
Yeah, so that's just a setting. And where is that? I should remember. I think that's actually the default. So I think that's where it's coming from. So this is, yeah, this is
John,
not.
so John,
Mhm.
let's back up. So I think whoever that question, we don't expect you guys to understand this. This is really for the developer, kind of side of the house. Yeah, like John said, is it over expenditure limit? Yes or no, right? If there's an expenditure limit set up, we go one direction. If you look at the picture, we go to the yes. You hover over, that's really for the technical details. That no that you saw is just an option within each individual node itself. There's not really an expectation, I think, for you guys to kind of understand the how to configure workflow as a technical side of the information.
Okay,
Right?
great. That's all I need to hear
Yeah.
right there.
Just ignore it. How about that?
See, this is me.
Yeah, if you're
getting
not
too
if you're
overview.
not sure what a diamond does, ask somebody to logically explain it, right? We tried to name them so it made somewhat sense to you guys.
I'm good. You can go ahead. I don't need to know it, so that's not what he said.
You don't want to learn SQL on the fly in the middle
Oh,
of
no, I'm okay. I'm good. I'm good.
See, yeah, this is where I get in the weeds too. So I apologize. So that is the full requisition workflow. So before I do anything else or go over anything else, do you guys have any questions? Does anything jump out as very scary? Oh no, we're missing something, or we didn't think of something, or does things kind of seem like they make sense for now, for what you know now, at least?
Yeah, I would say, focus on, you have one common structure, right, that it goes through, but the EVA approvals bucket is where you're going to be spending the majority of time with an organization, understanding what cycles it goes through, because that's, that ties into their approval roles that John showed. And then if an organization uses QMgr, then they'll be over in the QMgr land. So it looks like a big picture, but the majority of it you probably can ignore.
Hey, John, this is Bree. Are we gonna be able to see this grid with
Yeah.
our access? So if we ever
Yeah,
have,
when you're in as a just enter requisition on this left-hand side, you'll have a workflow tab after you click submit, and you can see this diagram. It's going to be on every single requisition.
okay, but we're not gonna have that grid view like what you were just on, where they could see.
Oh, the grid view? I don't believe so. If you did, you just click this little cog wheel, but that's really when you need to edit the grid, the view that I was looking at, which you guys won't be able to do.
Quick question for you. I'm assuming this is not drag and drop, right? And that grid you just did? show us.
Oh yeah, this is drag and drop if I want to edit it. Yeah,
Okay.
but that's only for configurators. Or
Okay.
like,
Thank you.
Yeah, let's look, it's not drag and drop for people to put it where they want it. It's for the developers and the designers to
Good, good.
drag and drop things where they want.
Okay, thank you.
well, if there are no other questions on that, I'm actually probably going to jump into QManager because I had a requisition set up for it. So I've got a requisition here. I created it actually in the site that I created yesterday or on Monday. Yeah, on Monday. We had some rules set up for routine, if you guys remember. So we already went through some of those approvals. And now we are at the buyer manager because I have turned on QManager for this site. So for QManager itself, the basic piece behind it is you are going to pick a user at this level to assign who works it at the team level. So what we were able to do is under procurement, you'll find a queue management section. So PRs to be assigned, PR assignments in progress, and assigned PRs. So we'll start with PRs to be assigned. So the very first one you'll see on this list is the one that I just created. It's this 320 at the end. If I want to assign this, I can check this box and assign buyer. This is a confirmation page. If you're picking multiples, it's just a nice way to click a few and confirm. So you would see all of them listed on here if you wanted to do more than one. In this case, you can pick one buyer. That would be anybody listed here. And again, this is still kind of in progress. So I believe this list is pulling anyone with buyer. It's not going to be separated by entity yet, but the idea behind it is still true. You can go in and if you have multiple lines, you can assign multiple lines or multiple requisitions to different buyers, or you can pick one buyer for all of the requisitions you've chosen, which gives some flexibility for whoever's reviewing this to be able to do it either when they choose their requisitions, they're choosing them based on some criteria, and then it goes out the door, or they can choose everything that needs to be assigned and look at each of them individually. And then it's as easy as just clicking, see, yeah, this is one of those. We're still in development part. But once you've assigned it, you can see now my workload starts to build. So this is a nice tool once we have multiple buyers that have requisitions assigned to them. They would see, let's say you have 5 different people. You'd see each person, how many of them have something to be worked. So if that number's 10 for one person and 1 for another, now maybe you decide to pick the person that has 1 because they have less workload. So we're starting to build a little bit of the logic behind it to help make the decision for who requisitions should be assigned to. It is worth noting as well on this, and I kind of skipped over it. This is a link, this little requisition. If you need to pop in, review it to be able to make a decision, you could do it by clicking on this little link here. So at this point, yep.
Can I ask a question? This is Kelly.
Sure.
So does this have anything to do with what sites people are in?
Yeah. Manager, then it needs to come through a queue.
So that doesn't have to, so it doesn't matter what site the requisitioner was in, it's still going to get to the right person.
Correct.
Okay.
Again, I'm kind of taking notes as well because I'm noticing things that need to be tweaked because this is still very much like this is the first cut basically that got put into UAT. I think we have a new one coming into system test, or some updates at least coming into system test tomorrow.
Hey, John, it's Kimberly. You mentioned you turned on QManager. How did you do that?
Show you guys real quick. So there is a table. And this is part of the organizational setup. So this is what's going to be in that AR that you guys create, or if someone needs to get it turned on, you would tell me which organization, or sorry, which site needs to be turned on. So if I look for my John site that I created on Monday, there is a field at the very end here called QManager. So this sets the site specifically to require a QManager to review and approve. If this is unchecked, it will completely skip this and move up to integration. So in most cases, for everybody that doesn't use QManager today, you'll never hit this section of the workflow. It'll just skip right by.
So,
If your site is turned on, it will stop.
okay, so as account executives, we're not going to have that access. We need to submit a JIRA ticket to have that turned on.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
And we would tell you each individual site within the entity that needs it?
Yep.
Or could we say apply to the entity?
You could say apply to the entity and I can figure out what the sites are. Honestly, at that point, it's whatever's easier, but we just want to make sure it's accurate, right? You don't want to just turn it on for the full entity if the full entity doesn't need it.
And can we get a sample of what that JIRA should look like and what it should contain?
Yeah, I have that on my notes right at the top. AR format for new orgas. I
Thanks.
gotta create that for you guys. But yeah, no, I'll definitely be a basic little template for you. Any other questions?
I'm gonna ask a question. Well, I'm gonna make a statement, not ask a question, maybe. So I think it's a little confusing what a user can do throughout the tool, depending on their site and their not workflow, but their, I'm gonna say role, but I know that's not what we call it right now. It's just like not in my head right this minute. Is there profile, thank you. Is there any way, is there a document that shows when you're in a site and you have the role, like what you have access to, but then like if you have QManager, you're gonna have access, is there some way to kind of overview that in a document so we completely understand it?
That's a starting point of what I gave you yesterday, correct?
We haven't even had you.
We haven't looked at it, so I guess fair enough.
Oh, okay, yeah. So that goes through, so no, it goes through, if you have this profile, this is what you have access to and how it, so take a look at that, Kelly. I think that's a very good starting point. It's not, it's not every minute detail, but it says if you have requisitioner, when you look at a rec, it's going to secure it this way. And that way, when you look at a PO, it's going to, so take a look at that and then we can expand upon that.
Okay, fair enough. I will do that. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
And I can, that's kind of the security side of what you can see.
Right.
I want to just talk about the rules because I did kind of go through this quickly on Monday, but what we can do as well from the rule setup itself, Kelly, is when you're reviewing a rule, you can see who the approvers are in that case. So you kind of reverse engineer it. By looking at the rule, you can see who the approvers are. If you head down to this approvers tab. So there is definitely is not a document that maps this for the 90,000 rules or however many we have in the system. But there are ways to tie things together once you kind of know how to move around. So I think that's something we can work towards. But yeah, take a look at what Mark sent on Tuesday. And if you have any outstanding questions beyond that.
Hey, John, I think there was a request to just kind of traverse through a requisition and watch it go through its life cycle. So.
Okay. Yeah, I was planning on doing that once.
Okay.
Once through the queue management over.
No, you're fine. Thanks.
All right, so back to queue manager. So the way that we had to build this was effectively you've got your queue, you've got the ones that either need to be assigned. You can actually kind of pause that process where I was starting to assign, but I hadn't fully assigned yet, which can be found in this assignments in progress. And then you've got assigned PRs. So this is really the buyers that are coming in and doing the work. They can come here and they can say, okay, here are the ones that are assigned to me to work right now. So in this case, it'd be as easy as coming in, looking at it. I can reset it or I can send it back to the actual manager if for some reason I can't work it or it was assigned incorrectly. Or I can actually come into the requisition itself and approve. And so I know it will take a little bit, and this is brand new. I think it just came in to system test even last week. So we're still working around and kind of tweaking some things to make sure it kind of flows well. But the main point is at least now you have a screen for, the VCCS buyer managers. They're going to live on this page, right? They're going to look at this constantly, and they're just going to be assigning things out left and right. And then for those people who are getting things assigned to them, they'll be on this assigned PRs. And then they're just going to more or less live on this page where they can start working and go through there. So we're still very much, looking through, finding bugs, that kind of thing. But the basic structure should feel fairly familiar for those of you who know it in current EVA, and hopefully allows for some flexibility for groups that don't use Queue Manager today to be able to use it in the future. We've talked a lot about ways we can kind of help in this PRs to be assigned section to really look at workload and help them make the decision, give them data, give the managers data to be able to make decisions faster. I think that's all part of the process, and that's something we can kind of grow into, but this kind of skeleton really gives a good basis for that. Does anyone have any questions?
Hey, John, this is Bree. Sorry, I'm needy. This is awesome. I think it's come a long way from where it was when we first started talking about it. Is there any potential for there to be a widget for this Queue Manager piece that lives in the menu now to be on the homepage for the buyer?
We are working on a widget. Yes, it is something that we're looking at, and I don't think it's in UAT yet. But it's something more or less that will show up as a widget that will say you have 10 to be assigned, and it'll just be a link that says 10, and then they can click 10 to come to here. It's not going to be super powerful, like they won't be able to do work from the homepage. They'll still have to navigate to that page, but it will at least trigger them to say, I need to go and do something.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Are they also notified by email or no?
When something is assigned, yes.
No, but when, like for the manager, when something's in the queue.
It should, yeah. Let me look. To do it. See, this is where we're getting into the weeds. You guys are going to be configurators in iValue in no time. So right here, notify via email activities initialization. Easy way of just saying when it comes in here, notify person.
All right, great. Thanks.
So. Any other questions on Queue Manager before I move into kind of the requisition? We'll do a full requisition. I'll copy the one that I was just working on, and we'll go through ad hoc a little bit. I'll show you guys as we go through the process, kind of how the history should build. Do a full.
Hey, John, would this be okay time to take a break?
Sure, we can do that.
So 15 minutes. And we'll roll into the next next group will. Cool. Okay, 15 minutes, so,
Donut time.
9:50.
All righty.
Thank you.
Talk to you guys soon. All right, are we ready to kick it off?
So all your,
Cool. All right, so I'm gonna, before I kind of start, I just wanted to say I'm gonna go through the requisition. We're gonna talk about the workflow preview functionality, ad hoc. We're gonna go step all the way through this requisition, all the way through to the buyer manager, which we just went through, just to kind of hit through that one more time. And then we're gonna approve the order. Does anybody have any other topics they want me to go through while I'm kind of going over that full kind of requisition cycle? Cool. Well, if anything comes up or anybody has any questions, just shout out and we can take a quick pause and look at it, because I think we're doing pretty good on time today. So. All right, so I've got our requisition. It's actually a copy of the one that we worked on earlier with the QMgr. And really, it's a very simple requisition. I have one kind of non-catalog item here with some basic information. It's only $1. You know, we've got some things filled out for fiscal year. We don't actually have any data put into our accounting, but we could if we needed to. But really what the main focus of this is going to be going through the workflow previews and how they work in conjunction with the workflow history to really kind of build the requisition workflow as you guys know it today. So we'll start with the workflow preview, which will be at the header before you click submit. As soon as you submit the requisition, there'll be a new tab called workflow. And in there, you'll have the look ahead. The button will effectively move into that section so that everything should be in one tab within there. But you can see here with the workflow look ahead, I'll have 2 rules that are going to fire: sign a rule purchase category, site level approver, the order that they fire in, so 50 and 60, and who the approvers are. In this case, it's John Caps, which is the user I created on Monday, and Shane. So getting into ad hoc, what we have the ability to do is actually insert approvers within the organizational setup for these rules. So we try to set up a very simple, who is your approver? So you pick your approver for who needs to be ad hoc. Where do you want them to fire, before or after, and then the rule that you want it to be. So let's say we want them to fire before the purchase category. You can add a reason. And then we're going to go ahead and save and close. So as simple as that, and we're going to do another ad hoc here in a moment, but I wanted to show you guys this first. We were able to add an ad hoc. If I go back to my workflow preview, I'll need to refresh it, but as soon as I come back in, you'll see. Let's see if I can force a refresh then. Yeah, so we'll need to clean that up, but this should show up in the rule order. It should be 49. And I think once I actually submit the requisition, it'll pop up. But you can add as many ad hocs as you want before or after. You can do it before the requisition gets submitted. You can do it while the requisition is in process. Now that I've submitted, you see we no longer have our look ahead button. It's not on the header anymore. It's everything will be contained within this workflow tab. So if I head to upcoming approvals, we still have this here. I think this is just a bug that we need to come through. Yeah. So the ad hoc isn't being applied right now. Like I said, we're in between, so I can actually go to a different environment to show you guys. I think you guys got some of the data, but not all of it. I don't think ad hoc's fully in UAT, so that's my mistake for coming in here. But conceptually, what it allows us to do is you'd be able to ad hoc before or after any given rules as many times as you need to throughout the entire process to be able to ad hoc what you need. To describe where it is in the workflow, it's going to be in this loop. So we can't ad hoc something, let's say all the way up here, but it can be the very first rule in our EVA approvals, or it can be the very last rule in the EVA approvals. Where initially I think we had the 9,999, it was always going to be the last approver. Now we have the flexibility to move it around, but that is still something that's obviously being worked. We're going through that. I want to say in this next system test drop, I think it's actually in system test right now, but we'll have to kind of play with that. But the idea behind it is you can pick and choose where the ad hoc approver is inserted, similar to what we can do today, which really kind of brings back that ad hoc functionality that we know and love today. So I know a lot of this was theoretical since that page didn't work, but do you guys have any questions on that?
Hey, John, this is Felicia. Will anyone be able to ad hoc approvers at any stage? So let's say it gets to Shane and Shane sees it and he said, oh, Lisa needs to see this. Is he able to enter Lisa into that?
He is, as long as it's in this section. So if Shane, let's say, is the $1 million approver, he could ad hoc Lisa as the very first approver in the EVA approvals. So she would see it before anybody else does. Does that make sense?
Okay, John, it's Kimberly. So you cannot ad hoc anybody in, like I couldn't ad hoc somebody in before the ELA or
Nope.
after the ELA?
The ad hoc has to live within in this bucket.
Okay. Thank you.
So I think there was kind of a general question of how we see and move through the approval process. I think Mark was kind of mentioning. So I'll kind of talk to that a little bit. So once you're in here and it's been submitted, you know, you can always look at what's called upcoming approvals, and this should build what's in front of you to be able to what needs to be approved. And then the idea is as those approvals occur, they start to add on to this approvals section down here of things that have been approved. And then between upcoming and what's been approved, you get kind of the full picture. So if I go ahead and just click approve once on here, we can take a little look. So you can see that that first one has fallen off because this is really the preview of what's upcoming. So you've already approved that first step, which I already mentioned. Oh, there we go. Now it's building. You've got this showing up right here, right? So organizational rules happened at 9:58. So I approved it as the accounting code approver. If I want to know what's coming next, I look at my upcoming and I can see here, I have the rule site level approver. It's going to hit the same approval profile, which will be the same users. So if I click approve again, when I look at the upcoming approvals tab, you'll see I don't have any upcoming. It is now moved into this next section, which is the buyer manager, which if we look at our flow itself, you can see we're also in buyer manager here. And the action of approving has added to this approvals table. So it kind of, between those two areas, you get the look and feel of knowing what's happening in what is a static workflow, but that the rules can be extremely dynamic and really knowing, okay, what's next and what has happened, and being able to look at those two things very easily. So
Hey,
we're on to our, go ahead.
Yeah, it's Kimberly. That's a question I asked yesterday. So you have an approval section, an approval history section, and previous approvals and refusals. And they all, in my experience, say something a little bit different. Where is the true history of the PR? Which of those buckets?
This guy right here, the one that we recently added. So this will tell you exactly what's happened to that requisition in its process. These are the core histories and approvals and mail histories that Ivalua provides. But as you mentioned, it gets confusing when you're looking at one of these and it says EVA approvals 10 times, you don't know what EVA approvals means. So that's why we built this table to be able to tell you exactly what's happening, so you have one source of truth when you're reviewing a requisition.
Okay, and I'm just gonna take that a little bit further. So if somebody is delegated a requisition, will it show there that it was delegated and the person to whom it was delegated to?
It will show who took the action of who approved it. So let's say I delegated it to you, it would show your name if you clicked approve.
But
The
not
action of delegating is stored, and you can see that in the base Ivalua area. So that's why we left these here, to be able to look at them. But you would see the fact that they could be delegated in this approval history. But that's a little more of a specific use case. That's why we kind of hid these, and really not hid, but collapsed to be able to work with that. Does that make
Okay.
sense though?
Yep, thank you.
Sure. All right, so now we are on to our buyer manager. So again, for those who remember from earlier, we've got our PRs to be assigned. I've got my copy of John. If I want to review copy of John, I can come in here, take a look, scroll around, look at the data behind it. I say, okay, I know who I need to assign it to. When I check this box and say assign buyer, it's going to ask, hey, are you sure you want to assign these out? Say, yes, I am. As I mentioned, we know main buyer is a required field. I've already started working with one of the developers to get that updated. If I wanted to use the bulk assignment, you can always fill this out and it will fill in every single buyer row, if you will. Or I can individually choose which ones I need as I go through. Again, from this page, I can review and say, hey, am I sure this is the right requisition? Yes. Come back and I can confirm my assignment. When that's done, you can see the workload starts to build. If I had 100 recs coming in constantly, you'd see this slowly start to build with the buyers that are available to be chosen. The buyers, and this is probably a level of detail, it's a little too high, but the buyers that can be chosen are based on who I have access as the approver. So my list of buyers here is who I have access to assign it to. So when we're talking about VCCS, they would have the ability to almost cross-organization assign buyers if they needed to. I know they have like shared service as their main bucket, so they would only see shared service. But in the future, if we needed to expand that to people in other organizations, we can do that. But now that it's been assigned, I moved my assigned PRs section. Again, similar process. I can review the requisition as now the approver who needs to be able to work this, and I can approve it. At any point when I'm in that section, I can actually go in and kick that requisition back to the manager if I need to, for any reason, and the manager can also kick it back for you. If someone went out on vacation and it's just sitting in their queue, someone can go in and move it. Or in the example you just gave, if their approval is delegated, they would be able to come in and work that. So now we've got our order that was created because all of the requisition approvals have finished. If I come back, actually, I'll refresh this page. It's probably an easier way to look at it. you'll see my status is updated to ordered. If I look in my approval diagram, you can see we've gone through our rules. We've gone through the buyer manager. We skipped through and there was no PO print, so it went right to order. If I scroll down to my history, you can see here, this is the kind of source of truth for what actually happened and why people were in the approval flow to begin with. So you can really kind of see from start to finish, you've got the upcoming approvals and the previews. That's building what's happening and what's coming next. And then as soon as things happen, they start to be applied to this approvals grid to really be able to track that. Anybody have any questions? So really that was all that I had to go through today in terms of kind of that functionality. Again, QMgr AdHoc is all constantly being worked on in its current state. We're tweaking it. We're finding things in dev. I think we got it into system test last week, as I mentioned, so on Thursday night. So we're still playing with things. Hopefully within the next or by the next UAT drop, a lot of that will be cleaned up. So it'll be really nice for you guys to be able to go in and play at a basic level. Everything I've shown you today is already in UAT. So you can go in and kind of play with these things as much as you need to. If you want to try something or you have a weird scenario that you're thinking of, feel free to create an AR or reach out to me and we can talk through it and really kind of get back to the business of figuring out the business scenarios and working to solve those and not worrying as much about the limitations, since now we have a lot more flexibility moving forward. Were there any other topics, Barb or Mark, that you guys are aware of that you want me to cover or go through?
I do not believe.
I think we covered everything that we got on our agenda. So the
I feel like I hear someone talking, but I can't.
Yeah, so if you guys in the room are discussing, you must be talking backwards. We can't hear you. So if you have another topic we want to cover, let us know.
Sorry, that was me. I was in the back of the room. So I was just asking the
We
team
figured.
if there was something else they wanted to see while we have John, especially, or if there's something they wanted to revisit, but not getting any takers. So.
Okay.
Anybody that's on virtually? Shane, Lisa?
I'm good.
Hey, guys, I think we covered the main thing. Our guys were kind of asking you to make sure you go through the requisition and kind of show it at a high level, which John just did. That was our main ask. So appreciate that, John.
Okay, no problem.
And just a plug here, if you're not seeing that button, clear your cache, because I called John yesterday because I hadn't.
And it is worth repeating. Remember what John said, QMgr AdHoc, not all of that is in UAT yet.
Right.
So just to repeat, it will get there eventually, but not everything is in yet.
Hey, Lisa Kirby, which button?
This guy.
Control F5. Oh, sorry.
Now we know how to do the.
Hey,
Team
this,
effort, John. Team effort.
Yeah, we got it. We got there.
hey, this is Kelly. I just wanted to say thank you guys for doing this because we are hearing feedback from our team that it's been very helpful it's, things are making sense. So, I appreciate you guys. We appreciate you guys taking the time out and doing this for us.
Of course.
Yep, for sure. Okay,
Glad it helped.
yep.
When is the next UAT refresh? When
Yeah.
is Q manager gonna be in there?
This afternoon, right?
The next refresh is next Wednesday. We will know and let you know, to release, so kind of what the status is on some of the larger items that will come into UAT then.
Okay.
And hey, that's another thing. I think I was supposed to have asked this already, and I think I should also maybe know the answer, but do we have a place, do we have a list in Confluence of when the stuff is supposed to refresh? So the Wednesday date, I guess, and the list of things that we should expect?
Hi, this is Lisa.
Yeah, okay.
John, can you go to Jira?
Sure.
Thanks. Oh, I like the folders options. I'm gonna have to pick up that so I can get more out of
Oh,
my
yeah. Check
dashboard.
this out.
Yeah. Oh, that's lovely. I'm learning all kinds of good stuff. Okay. I'll send out a link to this. You have instructions in the Jira user guide for how to add this as a dashboard. But John, you're gonna have to go to manage. Yep. And then go ahead and just do sponsor dashboard.
Sponsor.
Yep.
All right. I'll favorite it.
Ooh. It's another good way, guys. He just showed you how to add it over to your left nav so you don't have to remember these tickets.
I even
So
have,
if you
I
scroll
even have
down,
the dashboard. I said I should know.
if you scroll down to the bottom here and to the very, very bottom where it has fixed versions, you can find the next UAT release date. So you've got in the blue bucket on the far left, UAT 2022-08-03. There's a bucket of 22 items in there. That's going to be the best place for you to go to see things if you're curious about what's coming in next, and then to continue to go there for future releases as well. If you would like, I can update the COVA. Let me do that. Let me update the COVA TM testing dashboard that everybody is hopefully using to add a widget so you can see the upcoming releases. Let me do that and make it easier so you don't have to remember this dashboard. But the widget will look something like this, and that UAT and the 2022 dates, those are going to be where you're going to go in and click to see what's in what release. So I'll add that to the COVA TM testing dashboard, because I think everybody's already using that one.
Awesome. Thanks, Lisa. All right, anybody else?
Thanks, John.
Sure.
Thank you, John, for navigating to that for us. Okay. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank
Shane.
you. Yep.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, John.
Have a good one, guys.
Bye.